everyone. Well, welcome to Fearless Science. Thanks so much for giving up your time this afternoon to be here. And might I say that's already a positive first step along the journey to feeling more confident teaching science in your classrooms. I really hope that the next 20 minutes will at least convince or coerce you to take another step on that journey rather than fleeing back in the direction you came from. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land upon which we now meet, and acknowledge our gratitude that we share this land today, our sorrow for some of the costs of that sharing, and our hope and belief that we can move to a place of equity, justice and partnership together. So why are we here? And no, I'm not asking you for the answer to the meaning of life, excuse me, I mean why are we all here today in this room? Well, each of you has recognised that science is one of your least favourite subjects to teach, and that you would like to feel more knowledgeable, confident and positive about it. And I think that's awesome. Quality teachers are reflective teachers, and our kids can only benefit when we reflect upon our classroom practice and open ourselves up to opportunities for improvement and learning. So our focus today is on these three things. According to current pedagogical research, and there is so much out there, what does quality science teaching look like? What are we already doing well in our classrooms? How can we use these effective methods to improve our teaching of science? And how can we work together to bolster our morale and support each other to have a go and to feel better about what we're doing in teaching science? Because our time today is limited, and I'll just be skimming over the surface, I've set up a Google Team Drive where the presentation will be accessible, as well as a list of resources, and it will also be a place where we can collaborate, ask questions, share ideas, even plan to meet up, or if you wanted to come and see a DEM lesson here, you're more than welcome to do that if that's something you're interested in. I have an open door policy, so you're welcome anytime. Okay, what are the barriers we perceive to be getting in our way of feeling like we can be great science teachers? So a couple of weeks ago I sent you all a survey to find out exactly that, as well as a link to the documentary, A Private Universe. Yes, I can see you smiling. I know you're all very busy people, so I'd like to thank you for making sure that you got those surveys back to me. That really helped me to narrow my focus for today, and it also saved me using part of my time to explain that rather eye-opening documentary to you. I loved reading your responses to that study. Some of you admitted that you actually still hold the same misconceptions as those Harvard graduates. In terms of the video, I think this sentence really sums it up. And research shows us that the evidence that this is not always the case, especially in science and maths. Before I go into more detail about that and the implications that that has for us about how we go about teaching science, let's take a quick look at what your top responses were in terms of barriers to you teaching science well, or even wanting to teach science at all. The top response by far was lack of content knowledge or background knowledge of scientific inquiry skills and processes. And this may have been because you didn't receive much science instruction yourselves. Some of you mentioned that you didn't even remember learning science in primary school. I know that was the same for me. High school science may have been a fairly negative, boring textbook experience for many of you. And a few mentioned that science was a lot like maths. So if you were no good at maths, you couldn't be good at science either. The next major barrier was time. Most of you felt that the time that you needed to set up experiments and pack them away, organise your groups to work on investigations, often stopped you planning hands-on lessons, and so science became something tedious and something to avoid rather than to enjoy. Third down the list, and the one that I'm really hoping to help you with, as in turn I think that will help with all of the others, is collaborative support and effective PD. It's amazing what we can learn from each other, and we all have different strengths and abilities. It's just about creating a friendly, easy format that doesn't impact on our already overcrowded schedules, so that our jobs can become easier, more collaborative, more enjoyable and more authentic in our local context. The last two, availability of resources and attitudes towards science, whether that's yours, your students, your boss or the local community, they were also perceived as barriers, but not to the same extent as the others. As far as content knowledge goes, that one at the top, Here's the good news. Academic research designed to assess the impact of content-based professional development for teachers on student outcomes in science actually showed little to no improvement. Instead, what was far more impacting was pedagogical content knowledge around a student-centred constructivist teaching model with the teacher as a guide and facilitator rather than an imparter of knowledge. Indeed, knowing and giving answers to students and explaining scientific concepts directly to them was found to be far more detrimental to their success. As we saw in the case of the bright students and the Harvard graduates who were taught by professors with superior content knowledge, unless we understand what our students come to us with, what their misconceptions may be and their own knowledge structures of how the world works, and unless we then use the pedagogical research to inform our own classroom practice and help our students to challenge those alternative conceptions and then to socially construct new scientifically acceptable ones, then they're going to leave our classrooms time and time again none the wiser. Can I tell you that I only saw a private universe for the first time this year? It was mandatory viewing set by our university lecturer for my postgrad colleagues and I in our first week of study. And it was the first of many light bulb moments that I've had that have totally transformed the way I teach science. I knew that kids came to my classrooms with their own wacky, wonderful, imaginative ideas about physics, space, materials and life on Earth. What I didn't know was that some of my students, dare I say many of my students, even the really clever ones, were not always demonstrating clear understanding of concepts post-instruction. I've been teaching primary science in an RFF capacity for 8 years, and not to blow my own trumpet, I thought I was doing a pretty fabulous job. I'm passionately interested in science and maths, and my general knowledge base is quite broad. I had an awesome biology teacher in high school, and I blitzed my HSC exam. My students shared my enthusiasm for science and enjoyed my lessons. So what was I doing wrong? I didn't realise that the social constructivist approach was so crucial to challenging my students' firmly held misconceptions. I thought if I knew my stuff well and demonstrated concepts with models and guided kids through their investigations and experiments, all with enthusiasm and a bit of humour, then they would love science and they would get it. They loved science, but I now realise they weren't always getting it. A good example of this is when I teach the unit day and night to my stage 2 students. I usually begin with them drawing a picture for me, an annotated drawing of what their understanding of is, of how day and night occurs and what causes it. I love this lesson because it shows me the range of the different perceptions across the stage that the children have and the way they make sense of the world or sense of scientific phenomena in their own way. I then launch into a series of lessons, including modelling with the globe and torches. I get the kids into small groups. They use oranges with a skewer through the middle to show the axis, to show the Earth rotating, a sticker where Australia is, and torches to see where the light is coming from. We do shadow investigations, we look at animations, and at the end of the unit, the kids are able to demonstrate the knowledge of where the Earth is in relation to the Sun. They understand that the Sun doesn't rise and set, that the Earth rotates. They know that when Australia gets daylight when we face the Sun, and it becomes nighttime when we face away from the Sun, and, wait for it, when we face the Moon. What? None of my models involved the Moon. The Moon had nothing to do with it. But if I had focused on that misconception, which many of the kids had included in those initial drawings, then I could have actively changed this idea. This year, after learning about misconceptions, at uni, I taught the day and night unit better than I ever have before. And now when I say what causes day and night, the kids will respond with, it has nothing to do with the Moon. But it makes perfect sense that the kids would assume that it does have something to do with the Moon. You only have to think of posters and animations and cartoons where daytime has a sun in the sky and nighttime has a moon in the sky. The kids use their intuition about the fact that they see the moon better at night. So I now make a point of taking the children out into the daylight when the moon is visible in the sky and showing them, look, the moon is there, it's points in the sky during the day. How is it possible that we can be facing away from the sun and still looking at the moon? Their final annotated drawings after that were an absolute pleasure. They got it. Not one of them included the moon in their explanation of nighttime. So it was time to dust off my essays on Jean Piaget, remember those? And then get up to date with contemporary research on misconceptions and how best to challenge them. In the context, of course, of a constructivist teaching and learning model. Again, here's some more good news. If constructivism is the new black in science teaching, I'll just get you to go back to that last slide, sorry. Okay, so there's our friend Piaget, showing that current empirical research tells us that the social constructivist classroom is the most effective approach to teaching science. Yeah, so if constructivism is a new black in science teaching, then you're already on your way to success. In your classrooms, you already teach using this model. Your tables are in groups. During a literacy lesson, perhaps looking at characterisation, you ask your students to do a think, pair, share and brainstorm the main character and his or her characteristics. You might then ask them to pair off with another group and provide evidence for their thinking. Someone else in the group may have read or noticed something about the character that contradicts or conflicts the other student's view, and then you have some terrific argumentation going on. As you listen, you're able to use effective questioning to guide the students and direct them towards critical reflection and greater understanding. In a maths lesson, you might pose a problem and ask the students to think about their strategies and how they solve it, and then to share their ideas with a peer. Other students may come up with a different way to solve the problem or may have new questions related to the problem. You don't give them the answers straight away. You ask them to demonstrate their strategy and make thinking visible. And then you use where they're at to move them on or to guide them towards the knowledge that they will need that's necessary for the next concept to build upon so that it can be understood. Effective science instruction is very similar. Teaching science when you already have been using small groups, KWL charts, discussion, questioning, peer-to-peer teaching is going to be far less scary for you than you have been anticipating. The most important thing to remember when we look at these key features of constructivist teaching and the constructivist approach is that kids have their own ideas that are intelligently wrong. If we need them to be able to alter these misconceptions through active co-construction of new knowledge, we must first know what those misconceptions are. Research has done much of the hard work for us. There are books and papers and articles readily available that not only describe the common misconceptions held right across all disciplines in science, but also how to plan effective learning experiences to actively challenge them. And in that way, the child is left thinking, hang on a second, that can't be right. It doesn't match what I was thinking. Let me check that or try it again or create an investigation to back up my thinking. It's only when misconceptions are truly challenged in this way that the students can adjust their alternative concepts and assimilate the knowledge in a way that allows future learning to be effective. Don't panic if you find yourself giving the students direction and direct instruction though. That's fine. In fact, they often need direct instruction to guide them towards the desired thinking and to keep them focused. So how can we make that work for us as we tackle the task of teaching science and taking on the new syllabus next year so that our kids aren't missing out on those key skills and concepts that are essential for 21st century learning? As with every other key learning area or any aspect of teaching, the key to success is positive relationships with your students and positive relationships in the classroom. If your kids feel comfortable to share ideas, to make mistakes, discuss freely in the context of a learning space where mutual respect and high expectations are the norm, then the rest will come easily. Begin your science units by finding out what the misconceptions are, and then allow the children to explore with guidance and to pose their own questions and investigations. The resources to help with this are plentiful and they're excellent. I cannot recommend enough Paige Keeley's uncovering student ideas in primary science. I use the probes all the time, very often, along with concept cartoons, to find out what the kids' ideas are in a non-threatening, comfortable format. I'll include links and the probes, as well as the concept cartoons, on the team drive, but for now, I'll quickly take you through what one looks like and how I've used it with my classes. Okay, so if I were to teach my stage 2 students the unit on heat energy, the outcome there is identifies ways heat is produced and that heat moves from one object to another. The 5E instructional model, many of you are familiar with primary connections. That's the model primary connections uses, and the research shows that that's a very effective model for teaching science. It's a cyclic model, so it works through, starts in the engage phase, moves on to explore, and at any time can come back and forth through that cycle. Excuse the noise outside. Okay, so with primary connections, it's a terrific resource. I don't use the entire resource. I find that sometimes it can be very dry and that the children can find some of the activities a little boring, to be honest. So I pick and choose, but some of the ideas in there and strategies are really effective. The one I like, the group work with the students working in groups of 3 and having particular roles. I actually use pegs as the kids come in and we put them into groups of 3. The director has a blue peg, the manager has a green peg, and the speaker has a red peg. And they know what their roles are. We talk about that at the beginning of the year and they love that. It works really well throughout our lessons. Okay, I would use a formative assessment probe to start with to find out what are their misconceptions about heat energy. Okay. So this is a Keeley probe, the mitten problem, and it is one that I've used this year with my classes. It's a PEO formative assessment technique rather than POE, so where the students predict, explain, and then observe what actually happens. So we're looking at what their thinking is before we teach the lessons to change those misconceptions. So in this mitten problem, Sarah's science class is investigating heat energy. They wonder what would happen to the temperature reading on a thermometer if they put the thermometer inside a mitten. Sarah's group designed Sarah's group obtained 2 thermometers and a mitten. They put one thermometer inside the mitten and the other thermometer on the table next to the mitten. An hour later, they compared the readings on the 2 thermometers. The temperature inside the room remained the same during their experiment. So the children select one of the responses, and this is prior to any instruction. What do you think Sarah's group will discover from their investigations? Circle the response that best matches your thinking. They do this individually. So A says the thermometer inside the mitten will have a lower temperature reading than the thermometer on the table. B, the thermometer inside the mitten will have a higher temperature reading than the thermometer on the table. Or C, both thermometers will have the same temperature reading. This is a 2-tiered formative assessment. So they choose an answer first, and then at the bottom there it says, describe your thinking, provide an explanation for your answer. And that can be as simple as a sentence where the kids say, I think this because. So we're not just getting a guess A, B or C, we're actually seeing why they chose that response. Gives us a bit more information. Can I say in 118 of my stage 2 students, only 1 student told me that both thermometers would have the same temperature reading. The other 117 believed that the thermometer inside the mitten would have a higher temperature reading. So we have a look at the next one. This was a terrific experience for the kids and for me. It was a very enjoyable lesson because after providing that probe and getting the students' responses, I got them to work in pairs and they actually did the activity. We actually had a look at the thermometers, the lab thermometers, the week before, so that was a little bit of our engage phase, learning a bit about thermometers and how they work. The kids were exploring how to make the temperature go up and down, having a little look at it. And then we, in pairs, the kids selected a variety. I had about 15 gloves. got to choose whichever one they would like, and they made their prediction. Oh, sorry. And so they had a go, and what was fantastic was their responses when it didn't work out. This was exactly it. Mrs. B, my thermometer's broken, it didn't change, it was exactly the same. The good thing is we didn't then come up with the correct answer, because another child in the group, or in some of the groups, said, I think that's because there's a gap. There's a gap around the mitten. So when you put the thermometer, the heat can get out around the mitten. So rather than give them the answers, we continued with the investigation. We used their inquiry to create further investigations. The kids said, what if we tighten it around it so it doesn't, so the heat can't get out? So we did that. I gave them all some sticky tape and elastic bands, and they very carefully wrapped the mitten around the thermometer to see if that would work. Of course, it didn't. The temperature reading stayed the same. So then there was another child who said, oh, I think it's because the mitten is small. I think if it was a blanket or a jacket, it would work better. So we did that. We went on to produce that. We had to keep confronting the kids with this idea that it didn't matter what the material was and whether you bunched it up around the thermometer. That thermometer was not going to change. And it gave the kids the understanding that heat has to come from somewhere. Woolen mittens do not produce their own heat. This is a concept cartoon, which is another way that you could start this unit. It's a similar idea. In this case, you would get your kids to sit in a small group, show them the cartoon, there's the snowman, and it shows the research around concept cartoons deliberately chooses common misconceptions that students have. And this is a really non-threatening way for your kids to share that they actually might think the same thing as one of those children. It also gives them a chance to have their own idea there. There's a student there who has a different idea, so they can say, well, I agree with this one, or I think something different. Same concept, but this is what the research shows. I love this sentence. The theory of immaculate insulation remains prevalent among students. And I had no idea just how prevalent it was until I did that unit with my classes. And you can see, and likewise, we did the investigations around metals being cold. So you have to just use the kids, use thought experiments. When they talk about metal being cold, remind them, what happens on a hot day when you hop in the car and you grab the seatbelt? And they say, oh yeah, it's not cold then, it's hot. Yeah, but the sun heated it up. It gives them that thinking of where does the heat come from. Heat has to come from somewhere. Materials don't have their inherent heat. All right, so what are our next steps to go from here? I know this has been a very rushed, brisk look at how to teach science in classrooms, and we certainly need to get together and do that more extensively and to give you more ideas. But what could we do now? Where can we go? If you were to go and choose a scientific concept or unit, Google some of the common misconceptions. The research is out there. There's so much. You may even find that Paige Keeley's probes pop up, or concept cartoons to match that. So find a concept cartoon or a probe to match your concept that you've chosen and have a go. Give it to the kids. See how they respond to it. See the information it gives you, and that forms a starting point. And let's keep talking and sharing ideas. I would be more than happy. Please use that Google Team Drive. Message me if you need help or support or advice, or you just want to come and watch a demo lesson. Let's create a community where we can share our ideas and feel more confident about what we're doing. And I'm more than happy to help with that. So I'd like to acknowledge my university lecturer, Dr. Karina McKoy, who has opened my eyes this year to what truly effective science teaching is, and it's just changed the way I teach, which is remarkable. Gemma and Sophie Broderick, thank you, my daughters, my videographer and PowerPoint operator, my imaginary audience, the professional papers that I've used for today, and of course the New South Wales Department of Education. Thank you for coming. Please use the drive, and I hope that we can continue to collaborate in the future.